Streamed live from the heart of Washington, D.C. Here, you'll find a portal to vibrant voices, echoing souls, and an ongoing celebration of the extraordinary power of language. So, prepare yourself to join host Dr. Michael Anthony Ingram and his special guests as they explore traditional and spoken word forms of poetry.
Greetings. I'm excited to announce we're now Quintessential Poetry, online radio, YouTube, and Zoom. Through this shift, we are demonstrating our commitment to increasing our reach, offering new live interactions, and sponsoring deep connections, where we speak to poets and audiences from all over the world. Thus, I was pleased to have acclaimed poet and spoken word artist Laura Grevel as my first guest. Originally from Texas, Laura resides in Austria and has been in Europe for 23 years. She shared insights into poetry's power to convey universal experiences and emotions as a product of living in 5 countries. She writes primarily in English, but occasionally in other languages as well. In this interview, Laura discusses her influences, about the challenges of writing, and about poetry's importance in recording human stories. During our conversation, she read a mix of poems that addressed migration, identity, storytelling, politics, nature, and struggle. She deeply believes in the power of poetry to inspire empathy. Please refer to the promotional materials for Laura's full bio. Before we started our interview, I asked Laura to share a fun fact or thought about herself that is not found in her bio. Have a listen.
I have enjoyed living and being challenged by living in 5 different countries with 5 different languages.
Would you happen to have a poem written about that experience?
Yes, I do. Now, this poem is called Je suis Frau Spaghetti. Now, that's the first 2 words are in French. Je suis, that means I am. Then it's Frau, Mrs. Spaghetti. So I am Mrs. Spaghetti. And when I moved to enough countries, I started to mix languages when I got to a new one. And this is sort of how I sounded. So, Je suis Frau Spaghetti. Hello there. Je suis Frau Spaghetti. You see I'm not from here. You see I get confused. The words come out all skewed. Torn between 5 countries. I don't know what to do. And to put it bluntly, I'm feeling rather blue. I'm torn between 5 countries. The words keep sounding new. Please, please, please. Someone give me just a clue. Hello there. I'm new. Je suis Frau Spaghetti. Can't understand a word. Can you read this letter from the school? My kids speak German. From the school, my kids speak Italian. From the school, my kids speak French. Can you help me find a bank? A place to buy shampoo? A place to sit and think? There's so much I gotta do, but I just don't have a clue. Don't have no clothes. The van got lost. Don't have no bed. The van's in France. If you only knew, I'm hard of hearing too. I'm in a big, big stew. Got to help my kids. Got to see them through. Je suis Frau Spaghetti. You see I'm not from here. You see I get confused. The words come out all skewed. Have you ever had that view? Have you ever felt lost, 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 and not known what to do? Thank you.
What I'd like to ask you, based on your experiences, what is poetry?
For me, the world is a poetic place, and poetry is in everything. It's in birth, life, and death. And it's in the sad and the beautiful and the ugly. We search for an answer with our poems, I think. And we share things, we share moments, we share emotions. And in that, we try to see the world and to understand it better. That's what I think.
How does that happen?
Well, for instance, in the piece that I just read, which is a combination of it's a performance piece, it's showing how a person, and I come from a background with some advantages. It shows how people who have to move around the world have a lot of stress and a lot of worries. And if you come as, say, a migrant or refugee, you're going to have a much tougher time than I did, but it's already extremely hard. And so I guess in that piece, for instance, I'm sharing the trouble. Of course, all people have trouble, and that's pulling the universal in, which writing always needs to come in to make people all connect to a piece.
Poetry is important.
Absolutely. I think it's searching for an answer. It's searching for beauty in our lives and meaning. It's in both the written and the spoken form. It helps us deal with life and to try to understand our situation, to try, when we're writing it for other people, to communicate what we're experiencing, or if we're portraying a certain moment, perhaps not our own, but someone else's, we try to show the humanity of that moment and the way all people feel, and show that all people are connected.
I'd like you to share with me an early experience where you learned that poetic language had power.
I thought about this. I got this question earlier, audience. And I thought about this. And, obviously at different ages, we're hearing different poetry. And in my life, in the 60s, we heard speeches of JFK, President Kennedy. We heard speeches of Martin Luther King Jr., and these were played again and again over my lifetime. And as a young person, I heard these and I saw these. And then at church, of course, the Bible readings, and those readings were very poetic. And then music, of course, folk music from the 60s, the 70s, Joan Baez, Bob Dylan, the Jackson 5, all of those. Yeah, and then school, you start to read poetry and literature at school. And I was always very touched by things. I mean, how can you not be touched by these political speeches, right? They're very emotional and yes, they're just, it's even if there's no music with it, it has an incredible power. The power of the word, the spoken word is incredible, which is one reason I like being a performance poet. Reading poetry quietly is powerful too. But I do think poetry is meant to be read aloud, whether you're sitting by yourself or not, because the sounds of the words are so powerful. I love words.
As you think about your body of work, what are some of the predominant things? What do you write about?
My predominant themes include politics, nature, storytelling. A number of my pieces are really stories, and I come from a writing background of fiction and essays, which I think I did first because the schools and the university encouraged us to do those, that poetry was not a profession that we should pursue because there was no money in it. So, that's the American way. I do think there are cultures who have thousands of years of poetry importance and respect, incredible respect. The U.S. is obviously not thousands of years old. I mean, the modern government and this kind of thing. And we don't have all of the Native American works written, unfortunately. I'm sure they have and still have a very strong oral tradition, which most humans over the earth had. But so the predominant themes, yes, I write about, and what causes me to write about any particular thing. Sometimes if it's politics, then it could be a current event. Storytelling can be anything that I read about, that I hear about, or something from my history. And then The nature, I really love nature, and so I'm concerned, for instance, with climate change. My pieces are not necessarily always just about that, but respect for nature. They're showing that, and yes, I think, let me see, I can look at my notes. I'm one of those people who sometimes if it's not there anymore, my mind has gone. I think
understand.
The human spirit. Okay. I mean, for me, the human spirit is in all stories. And I've started writing some more pieces, I think, that are focusing more on that. And I like that. And I've heard on some of your wonderful podcasts, people emphasizing that. And I found that fascinating and beautiful to hear about, the point, the world and the human spirit. And it's pivotal for me, I do believe in the soul of each person, which works well for me because I believe in equality. And democracy, I believe, supports equality, and poetry is important for that, to give the voice to everyone, and so many voices today are heard, and that is very good.
Nicely stated. Laura, please share a poem.
I think I'm going to go with a sort of storytelling, political piece. This piece came to me after the Black Lives Matter protests. As you get older, you have memories of flashbacks of all these different times, and you start putting things together. That's a plus of getting older, to be able to put things together. This is called 1980 Juneteenth Rising. It is a historical piece in my own life. I'm walking down this hot street. I'm holding a baby walking down this hot street. I don't know why I'm doing this yet. I'm thinking I'm just doing my job. I'm a park leader, a skinny white girl, on this second ever Juneteenth parade in Austin, Texas, celebrating the day the slaves heard they were free. I mean, I know why we're doing it. I work at a park, 2 parks. One, all the kids are black. One is mixed race. But it hasn't really dawned that the heat of this march is not just the sweat of my arms, the sweat of this child who is black, not just our sweat sliding over each other, intermingling and dropping, sizzling on the brutal street as the drums come solemn behind us. It hasn't even dawned that the need of this child is not just that this child's mother is at work, not just that this child is a defenseless infant, as the drums come solemn, as the drums come solemn, come solemn. We're marching down this hot street, a gaggle of kids between 3 park leaders, all squinting into the sun, almost nobody watching from the sidelines, 'cause this ain't Congress Avenue. This street is a backside to ugliness. Between the Villa Capri parking lot and the Lyndon Baines Johnson Presidential Library parking lot, a street radiating heat, cooking us like stew. But we march on, this baby and I. We made it, sister, and you never complained. At 9 months, you knew. It's taken me 59 years. Today, I'm marching down this hot street. I'm marching down this hot street with you.
As you think about your body of work, how does a poem begin for you? With an image, or form, or idea?
A poem for me begins different ways. Sometimes it's an image. Sometimes it's a scene. Sometimes it's a happening. And sometimes a line comes to me. The one, Je suis Frau Spaghetti, you see, I'm not from here. The lines came to me. The piece I just read, the Juneteenth piece, I saw the scene of myself and all these people marching on that really incredibly hot street and sweating. Yes.
You are a performance poet. What is the relationship between your speaking voice and your written voice?
That's an interesting question. As I said, I've written fiction for years and essays. And so obviously with those, I have long ago in the U.S. read aloud short stories at literary events. And even then, I put emphasis into those stories and certainly dialogue. But I guess, and of course, I've been writing more poetry. I always wrote some poetry, but in the last 6 years, I've written, mostly poetry. And I think doing that, hearing your voice and how it sounds, and then when I perform things, pieces evolve. I mean, I have had some that performed, and then after a day or two of practice them, I realized I was supposed to sing parts of it. And I'm not a singer, but, for the cause, you sing, and people don't laugh unless they're supposed to, so that's working out. But I guess the relationship with poetry, because, as I said, I do believe it's a read out loud media, I hear the sound of the words because they're so important. And, there are people who actually see colors with words and I think even smell words. And that's quite an interesting concept. I don't, but words give emotion for me, different words, and for, I think, all people. And that affects what I write and how I try to make it sound when I'm reading. I mean, I think it's, who knows, I come out of an American tradition that is, what did we had earlier than my time, really, but there was vaudeville, there were these musicals were very important in the U.S. The jazz, blues, country western. I mean, there's so much performance and that's very rich. It's a rich tradition. And, so I think that comes into my poetic voice.
You write based on your feelings.
Oh, yes, absolutely. There's a lot of feelings, emotion. This 1980 Juneteenth Rising piece, the Black Lives protests and then the reaction of the government, and then my memory of that. And that was, like I said, it was only the second year, although in Texas, that holiday was earlier than, as a state holiday, than the national holiday, which was only put in, I believe, with President Biden. So in Texas, that was already some sort of state holiday earlier. And this, was around maybe 79 was the first march, although much earlier, obviously, there had been celebrations. But this was an official march down a public street. And there was a lot of emotion in that. Even when I was marching, there was a lot of emotion. It was, an incredibly strong, fierce, sort of prideful, there we were with these little kids and it was so hot, and, but it was, you could feel that this was so important and powerful. And I think when I write certain pieces, the Je suis Frau Spaghetti piece has the emotion, and I put humor into it, because you do have to have humor in your life to keep going. And when you're always finding yourself in a new place with a new language and you're trying to figure out where anything is, very confusing. And obviously, your emotions are in high flare up, I would say.
Please share another poem.
Okay. Yes. So I think, since I've just talked about that, this is a quieter piece, to give an example of that, although you will see that it does have a little bit of a performance, and certainly the emotion. One could say that in a certain way became, in my second half of my life, a nomad. And this piece is called Nomad. When I left, I took my mother's last breath, heard over the phone a silk tiger dress on sale at the dry cleaners, an orange rock from a desert, the loss of friends, the questions, the smell of rain, the taste of the last night, the grief, the bats. I remembered myself at the last minute. When I left, I took the hedgerows and the hedge smiles of the children who'd carried miles. I took the town's black nights and the children who tried to find the light. I took the city's slights, the hard-bought strikes, the pitied rights. I took a turn for the worse, then a step back to learn. I had not much to give, but I filled the sieve, poured my heart into the people's grief. Take this quick, before the thief. When I left, I took my children's teeth and 4 dictionaries, because languages are useful. I took the memory of many photos, the moody sky, the names of my kin. There was no room for disappointments, but I worked in 2 donuts. My passport was moldy. I traded it for yours. I freed my laptop at the park, sold my phone at the corner. I added a pencil, a small notebook, and the word love. All else seemed superficial. Thank you.
You know, there's something about your voice. It's rich, powerful. Thank you for sharing that piece. All great writers have great writing influences. What are some of yours? What makes them great in your eyes?
Well, there are so many writers whom I love, and those include fiction, essayists, and poets. Some poets I loved. Well, to be honest, one of the first children's books I read was Robert Louis Stevenson, A Child's Garden of Verses, if I've got that right. And then Walt Whitman, the American poet, Khalil Gibran. I love The Prophet and his profound work. Maya Angelou, whose performances too are just stunning. She puts it all together with the words and the performance. I liked the magical realism of Latin American writers, Marquez in Latin America, and then Mikhail Bulgakov, Russian. I really enjoyed. There's so many. I really love so many different styles of writing. The Americans, Edgar Allan Poe, we had early in school, and wonderful example of beat and rhythm in that. And yes, well, there's just, you can name people and I'll say yes.
I've figured out what it is. It's the cadence of your voice. You make words move. That's what it is. You make words soar. Do you model yourself on someone else?
The influence, I guess so many influences have helped me. My father had a very good speaking voice that was very commanding, deeper than mine, and he could easily talk to the room and had a really strong presence and be the spotlight. I was going to say I once read stories to my niece and nephew in the U.S. I'd gone to visit, and I noticed, I wasn't doing performance poetry right then, but I noticed my niece said, when her father said, well, do you want me to read or would you like your Aunt Laura to read? And she said, I would like Aunt Laura to read. She reads better than you. Her father's, he can read just fine. But I hadn't really, I did some performance work in the 1990s. I don't think at that time that I was so aware of my voice as I have become, in the last 6 years. But yes, in some of the early poetry festivals in Austin, Texas, I performed and did some short plays that I wrote. And so I was performing then. And then there was a long hiatus where I lived in countries where I couldn't have communicated with the locals.
You mentioned fiction. In what ways does poetry differ in fiction, from writing fiction?
Well, I mean, obviously the conciseness of poetry, although, there are poems and poets who, they're very long works. There's whole books that are written as poems and poetry, and ballads were poetic. This is how, many early works were recorded, and even histories, one could say. But fiction much more, it's obviously a longer immersive activity for the readers. It takes longer to read a whole short story or a novel. Poetry builds, I would say, very quickly a scene that works for each word. I mean, it's a short story already needing to be more perfect than a novel. And I will confess that I have written novels that aren't published, and short stories, some that are, and some that have been commended but not published. But the joy of poetry for me is the conciseness, and that I can really focus on each word and the phrasing and the play with the next line, the pauses, the rhythm, the tone. And I do write at times essays or fiction that have lyrical sound to the writings. And I do write both form, although less form. I write more free verse, and I write prose poems, which some people don't consider poems. But I'm delighted that there is such a broad style of poetry these days. It goes with sort of a democratic equality of humankind, and then with poetry, it allows people to go in so many places with their poems. And I think I really enjoy that, as opposed to the shorter form that I can, and mine are not always all that short. They can be a full page, almost single spaced, or they can be 2 pages or 3 pages. And I do have longer ones. I have not brought the really, the 5-minute ones tonight, but yeah, I can do a slightly longer one in a minute. That's a storytelling type poem.
Well, please share the piece. I'd love to hear it.
Yes. So this piece definitely comes out of the storytelling angle, and it was inspired by an Associated Press article from a few years back on the war in Ukraine, and it is free verse. It's not necessarily prose poem where it's just written like a paragraph. It's in lines. It's called The Neck of the Head, and the first line is comes from a line that it was similar by a woman named Natalia. The neck of the head. A woman is like the neck of the head, says Natalia, standing in a military tent in high heels, a lovely red dress, addressing medical needs. As a volunteer in Ukraine, she moves everything. Why should a woman hold the knife? Because comfort is not a word that sat in that room. Meanwhile, Ludmila is back in Kharkiv in her apartment with the boarded up windows. A woman is the neck of the head, says Ludmila. A return to take care of her aging parents, where the young woods still stand, breathing timidly, where the dirt path still waits with bated breath, where the children play in the park on swings embedded with shrapnel, unfazed by the sound of distant artillery, by the sardonic jokes of those who survived the night. Some of the flowers will grow, they will rise, like the people denied. For Taisia remains in Poland holding her baby son close while she dreams of return, while Zaporizhzhia, her hometown, and her husband remain near the front lines, where there are bodies in the street, where people drink melted snow, while for her time has stopped. She dreams of their forests and fields and food. For a woman is the neck of the head, says Galina, whose teenage son has stopped asking when they will return. He probably knows they can't, though he said, "Stay in Warsaw, don't go far from home." For everything is uncertain, crushed with sadness. Meanwhile, Natalia, in high heels in a military tent, smoking sweet cherry cigarillos, in a lovely polka dot dress, to a backdrop of bombardments and air raid sirens, her backpack pocket holding a list of family contacts in case of her death, stands in the rubble, delivering medical lessons, turning the war by the neck of her head.
Laura, what are you trying to communicate with your heart?
I try to communicate stories, moments, emotions, and predicaments and situations. Again, the humanity or the beauty of nature or the beauty of humanity, even in its predicament, and that people would see the beauty of this woman and these women. Their own predicament, there's still, there's always humanity, and we need to remember that. And that people all over the world and all over in our own country and our own state or region are all people, even if we only read facts and figures about them. They're all people, and just as nature is, whether we're close to where the desert is becoming more desert and growing because of climate change, to have compassion and empathy and for our fellow beings, human, plant, animal, and perhaps to think about if we could do something, or yes, I mean, not everyone is able to do something for everyone, but I think understanding is a great beginning.
Right. Empathy?
Empathy.
Yes.
For me, empathy is being able to put yourself in another person's place. And when I first started studying fiction writing, that's what they told us. If you can communicate the universality with a certain character, then people are not just thinking, oh, this is just about that character, or this is just about that tree, but that they feel connected to it, and they can put themselves in that position and have compassion for it, have a feeling for it, have an understanding, at least, of where that person comes from, or that animal or tree is over there. I've always loved plants too. So, as a young person, I felt that plants had feelings also. But yeah, so I think that for me, empathy is related to our universality and this is, I mean, people write and tell stories also to entertain, and certainly some of mine, I'm trying to entertain to a certain extent, but also to tell history and to tell about your fellow beings.
Laura, please share a poem.
Okay, yes. And about that, just comes to me right now is when we're poetry as opposed to fiction. In a short little piece, you can get an immediate effect. And of course, fiction can be incredibly powerful, and essays too. But I'll do one here that's also got sort of a tone, rhythm, lyricism that I think pulls that in a very short piece. It's called Journey. I named my daughter Journey today as she was born. The contractions came as wails that sang through horns of storm. I named my daughter Journey. The birthquake shook my frame, as gales of scorn and glory sang rounds of rough refrain. My journey leaves tomorrow, grown tall and made of iron, her legs spun long as thorns, her feet of brass and morn. My journey treads this world in gold of self-made mold. Her crown is clouds of thought, her heart a peace self-taught. My journey leaves for future a state of mind and change. Her wails will guide her ship, the rain will bless her name. I named my daughter Journey the day that she was born. She leaves today for ever, where death is never Lord. Thank you.
Let's imagine for a moment that writing a poem is like baking a cake. What would be some of the prevalent ingredients going to the making of a poem? What do you put in it?
That can, I would throw in, if I'm, for instance, I was recently out in nature and I heard an owl, and I threw in, the owl, the pieces, the sound, and different, and sort of it was getting dark, the feelings. So I said the feelings, the visuals, the auditory sound of the owl, which kept going, he or she. And I tried to put that sort of in a bigger cosmic framework, whether it was providing, say, a bigger answer. It wasn't just the sound of an owl singing in the forest, cooing. So, yes, I think I throw in all sorts of things and visuals. And then with the words coming out, the sounds of the words, you have to translate what you're putting into it, onto the page, into the sounds and the flow and the rhythm. And I really enjoy that in both the free verse writing and if there's a form I'm trying to do, I enjoy it. It's a brain tease too. It's emotions, but it's also if you're trying to fit things together, it's sort of a marriage of the emotional with the mental, I guess the sound and the meaning of the words. And some things are more abstract and I do have pieces that are surreal or have parts that are surreal or more abstract, and still the emotion and feeling need to come together. So I think the cake would be sort of a mess as a cake. As a poem, it needs to have things in it that surprise people. That is what makes it interesting, is when parts, it needs to surprise the listener and the reader and have things, it provides a fresh perspective maybe. That's also what poets are trying to do. And a fresh perspective can help people come to an understanding or see something that they didn't see before in their own lives and in the world. And so even if it's just an owl singing in the forest.
Wow. Wonderful answer. Laura, does it hurt you to write poetry? If not, why not?
Does it hurt me to write poetry? At times it's painful. And when I perform, it can be sad and very emotional. And I have to sometimes sort of rein myself in, because when you're literally acting a piece, then you put yourself in that place. And so the emotions come out, because, if you read something, you can make something sound really boring that's beautiful, or you can make something sound beautiful. I mean, you can make lots of things sound beautiful if you have the right flow and everything. So there is, and sometimes it's sort of a bittersweet thing or a beautiful thing. And, makes, if some piece brings at the end a tear to my eye, I'll think, okay, that one works. It gets something coming out. And it's not that I cry at all my pieces. If I feel sort of a hit, and I mean, the different endings can be different. Some are very powerful, some are quieter. So that depends. But if you get the overall effect of the written piece or the piece, and you feel that, yes, that can definitely, it can hurt a little bit. Yes, absolutely.
Now, are you willing to be hurt by the poetry of others? If not, why not?
Yes, I think so. I go to lots of international open mic Zooms and I hear poets read and I do, I feel hurt. I cry. Sometimes it's out of the beauty of what they're describing. And it could be beauty and it could be poignant or bittersweet, beauty, a description of life. But yes, I enjoy being affected by other people's poetry, also by their humor, if they have humor. And yes, it's, and of course, some people write about terrible things that have happened to them, and that's very affecting too.
Please share another poem.
Yes, I certainly will. Thank you. This piece, again, comes out of living in different places and seeing people move in different places. It is called Children. You will gather children, those you seeded and not, from the fields and cities, from the very air. You will gather them because it is predestined to meet them and share. Love is a commodity in great demand. Attention is a precursor to giving a hand. Be not timid, be bold, be generous. Walk the road knowing the paths will connect. From the east and west, the north and south, they'll arrive with questions, with avenues for advice, with grief and joy. They'll arrive from all continents. They'll arrive with contests and baskets. They'll arrive with a boat for the future. There may not be a place for you on board, but there will be space for your spirit, your offering to those who sail. Thank you.
In that poem, tell me about a line that you are most proud of writing, or conversely, a line that challenged you to write.
I think in this one, some of the several lines, I had to be willing to open up myself, because as writers, you wonder, will people make fun of that? Will they accept that? Some of the ones like love is a commodity in great demand. It's, the vulnerability of some of these lines. There may not be a place for you on board, but there will be space for your spirit. I think it's sometimes the vulnerability that is one of the hardest things to write about.
Tell me about a poem that you are proud of writing, but fearful about sharing due to potential misinterpretation.
Proud of writing, but afraid or vulnerable about sharing. Well, okay. In this one, it is slightly longer. It's more closer to 5 minutes, and it's called Revenge is Off the Table. And this piece combines various things happening in the world that was a reaction to things happening with the story of my grandfather parachuting out of a plane, a B-24 in World War II. So I had told the story of my grandfather's parachuting and survival. But I think I always needed a frame for that to give it a bigger meaning. And the interesting thing was, I mean, it's of course enough if people tell their World War II story, but I thought it needed something bigger. And so this was at the start of the war and the happenings in Israel and the Middle East and the reactions of various governments. And so this was I was in South Africa at the time because my son lives there, and I was visiting him, and so I was reading a lot about South Africa. And of course, I did already know about Nelson Mandela and the history of South Africa with the apartheid, which when I was first in university, we were signing petitions to divest for the universities to divest from South Africa, to pressure South Africa to stop the apartheid, which took a long time past 1981 or 2 when I did that. But in the 90s, that finally came to pass. And so I was very touched by reading about Nelson Mandela and his philosophy, which was all about love and brotherhood and Ubuntu, which is a social responsibility kind of approach, and the lack of revenge. So the people who were originally from South Africa not to want to have revenge on the people who came to be colonists. And so it was such a beautiful way. And to be honest, there was the rugby game. And we watched one of those at a pub. And the man, and I'm going to try not to forget Sia, but the current rugby captain is incredibly respected in South Africa, and he's a man who believes in the Ubuntu and the Nelson Mandela philosophy, and is a man of faith, and also trying to help people he was terribly disadvantaged, but help other people and young people get educated and have sports opportunities too. And so I was so touched by all of that in South Africa, and I wrote about, with oblique references to the Middle East, but not specifics, but just the piece goes between talking about the philosophy that I sat in South Africa, and that I would mention part of Nelson Mandela's philosophy, and then I would go to my grandfather falling out of the plane, and then I would go back to Nelson Mandela, and that I was sitting in South Africa, and that things were not going according to Nelson Mandela's philosophy in this other place. And that was a very difficult piece because of the politics and because of people taking sides against certain peoples. And so that was quite difficult to put out there, but it was very well received. I've read it a number of times online, and it is a powerful piece. And it's not just about my grandfather, obviously. It's about the bigger scope of things and what he decided after the war, which is always, why did I survive? And his final eventual message from God was that he survived to be kind to people. And that went with Nelson Mandela's philosophy.
If you feel comfortable sharing it, I'd love to hear it.
Okay, yes, this poem was written in South Africa in late October 2023. It is called Revenge is Off the Table. I sit in a country where apartheid was once the law, where apartheid began a civil war. I sit here while war begins in another country where apartheid is an accusation. But in this poem, where the weather is beautiful, revenge is off the table. My grandfather, meanwhile, as he fell from the sky, the B-24 exploding nearby, quite clearly he saw the face of his 5-year-old daughter. As he fell from the sky, his parachute upside down, quite clearly he saw the green of the field. As he fell from the sky, burnt hands clawing the chute open, quite clearly he saw the hands of his wife. I sit in a country where Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in prison, where Mandela believed in forgiveness. So in this poem, revenge is off the table. My grandfather, meanwhile, as he fell from the sky quite nearly, he saw the old black walnut tree in the dry creek bed. As he fell from the sky quite nearly, he saw his brother and himself trapping ringtail. As he fell from the sky quite nearly, he saw the sheep grazing out in the pasture. I sit in a country where 12 million are in dire need of housing. But Nelson Mandela believed in reconciliation. So in this poem, revenge is off the table. My grandfather, meanwhile, as he fell from the sky and heard the crash of his plane, quite dearly he saw the faces of his crew. As he fell from the sky, quite dearly he heard the song of the morning dove. As he fell from the sky and landed in a tree, quite dearly he heard his own voice pray words that he'd forgotten. I sit in a country where millions go hungry every day, but Nelson Mandela believed in the equality of all. So in this poem, revenge is off the table. My grandfather, meanwhile, after he fell from the sky and met the faces of farmers brandishing pitchforks, quite clearly he felt the solid ground beneath his feet. After he fell from the sky and witnessed German officers save him from the farmers, quite clearly he felt his own heart beat strongly. After he fell from the sky and came face to face with the pilot who downed his plane, quite clearly he saw himself standing on a hill in a shower of radiant light. I sit in a country where apartheid was once legal, but Nelson Mandela championed peace and human dignity. And now people walk forward down the road. So revenge is off the table. I sit in this country while in another country war wages in philosophies not in accord with Mandela's. My grandfather, meanwhile, after he fell from the sky, after he was a prisoner of war, after he was freed, quite clearly asked God why he survived when so many didn't. Years went by before he heard the answer. You survived in order to practice believing. The weather is beautiful and revenge is off the table. Thank you.
That poem packs a punch. Laura, we live in a world where there's good, bad, ugly, as well as indifference. What do you view as being the role of a poet in modern day society?
What is the role of the poet? Well, in a democratic society, and all societies, I think part of the role is to tell the stories of our lives and our brothers and sisters' lives, other people's lives, to tell the histories, and to put these stories out there to show the commonality that we all share, the humanity, and sometimes to put perspectives out there that may make people think about different topics that they haven't thought before. And even as the poet, we write things because we're searching at times for an answer. The role is to bring things up and also to record the beauty of life. And I don't just mean, when things are gold and shiny, but the beauty of the human spirit.
Laura, why can't we as poets just write about rocks and trees and butterflies. Are we required to write about social issues? I just want to write about a butterfly. Tell me, are we required to do that as poets?
Well, I'll say one thing about what I learned early in fiction writing decades ago was that if you wrote a story that was just happy, nobody wanted to read it. And the stories that had some strength had a lot going on. They had drama, they had sadness, tragedy, etc., and even tension. One of my fiction writing friends said, "What is it about tension, that people are so interested?" And I mean, obviously we have songs that are happy, and poems that are happy and have butterflies or trees. But I think the human mind and soul will see metaphors in things that pull out meaning that is bigger than just the butterfly. And that's good. I mean, life is interesting. The world is very interesting, and there's so many dimensions. And yes, it's just like the owl I was talking about. The poem went on to talk about sort of finding an answer, and that meant in life, not just the owl's song.
When you're writing a piece, who's driving, you or the poem?
Well, I would say when it works best, the poem is sort of driving itself. And I come from, my parents were visual artists, and I always remembered we saw one time this program on Michelangelo and other artists does a stone carving sculptor. Is he finding it? And the artist said, "No, I'm just scraping away what's there, scraping the stone away to leave what is really there, the figure that is there." With writing, you're not scraping things away as you're sort of letting things flow out. And I've seen many writers say things like that. I'm a conduit. I don't really control it so much. And I think some of the more interesting and fresh, original things come when you just let them come. And I've some myself too, although not always, but I have one friend, he always feels like he kind of goes down into this subconscious creative flow that just comes out. And I would think he's saying that he's not really controlling that either.
As you think about your body of work, what do you think it conveys about the human condition?
Well, I hope it conveys the multiplicity and also the wonder of the human condition. And I hope my pieces give a diverse flora and fauna, if you want to call it, of the human condition. Because yes, I mean, just like with storytelling, why do people want to hear stories? We want to hear about how other people have dealt with things. And we want to hear also the humor, the life, the color, the music of life. And I hope that my pieces have communicated some of that at least.
Think you were meant to be a poet?
Do I think I was meant to be a poet?
Yes.
Yeah, I was thinking about that question too. And as I've said, I've written fiction and essays earlier for literally decades, spending more time on that. And then when I used to write these little things, and early on I knew there were poems, but then I think later I was writing these things that are more spoken word or prose poetry and little vignettes and things, and I didn't think of them as poetry. But then when I, in 2018, fell into this group and was passionate about writing poetry, and it just seemed to all come out. I think, yes, I was meant to be a poet and I never knew it. I really enjoy, it's fun to be a poet.
So yes. We've reached my favorite part of the program, the Poetry Lovers Concert. This is an opportunity for you to share 3 or 4 of your works back to back without interruption from me. Laura, you're on the stage.
I will start with a piece that again has some, a little bit of immigration in it. This is called To Be a Good Banana, You Have to. In Texas, people eat a lot of banana bread, she said importantly, in a place that wasn't Texas, to people who weren't from Texas, and they winced. It is hard to be a good immigrant, she thought resignedly. It is hard to stop trying to introduce the past banana to the present banana. It is hard to stop comparing the present banana and the past banana. It is hard to stop banana picking. It is hard to stop banana looking. It is hard to forget the bananas you knew for 50 years. It is hard to forget the bananas you spoke for 50 years. It is hard to learn to banana here. Thank you. And now I'll go to a second piece. This is called She. And it is a sonnet called She. The toad, as large as a child's dollhouse, appeared, mother-willed, near me one warm day, as I freed small trees from nettles and rose, wielding sharp clippers so wildly and gay. The silent toad crouched, judgment in her stillness, gray-brown in color, and knobbed as with clay. Her musing stopped my work as would kindness. My feet picked me up, led me away. Tonight, from this bed, I hear her again, before dawn leaves a cold white hovering. She hibernates out there, a living hymn, in the woods, in a burrow, eyes closing. Holding her ancient knowing close, she prays, a simple silence that makes the moon sway. Thank you. And now, oh yes, I can do 2 more. This is called Girl Walking Across Europe, and there is a YouTube piece on this, both I'm me doing it by myself and a collaborative group, which I really recommend, is wonderful, of East Midlands UK poets. It's called Girl Walking Across Europe. Let's watch a girl walk across Europe. Walk across Europe with a backpack and a cat named Hermione Wob. And as she walks, people join her, not to tell her to go home, not to warn her off the borders, but to give her flowers and biscotti and an embroidered cloak, and to walk beside her across the boot of Italy, where the sea captain did not get arrested for saving her from the sinking boat, but was lauded and crowned with roses, where the embroidered girl walks on with Hermione Wob to arrive at the Austrian border, where she is not sent to a refugee camp, but where the chancellor greets and gifts her with a handsome horse-drawn carriage, where she rides and parades with a brass band through a Vienna that throws her kisses, where at the city's edge she gets out and asks to walk on, calling Hermaniwab to her side, walking along the Danube with blue in her hair and honey on her lips, where she waltzes on, copper skin shining, singing an ancient chant. Thank you. And if I'm allowed to do one more, this is called Epiphany. Each bush and bird is a prayer. The feather, the claw, a surprise. The leaf, the bud, an answer. The ridge across the sky is a chanting wall. The cloud pattern, a repeated mantra. The breath of wind on nape, a kiss. The chanting builds itself into a fortress, faces off the all. No questions remain when love is revealed as mercy. Thank you.
What do you think you've learned about yourself as a result of being a poet?
I think I've gained confidence in certain ways. I've learned that with performing and with writing and sending things out to get published, people appreciate my work. I guess I've learned that it's very important to me to try to express these things that I try to show, the universality of humanity, of humans, the stories of people. I always valued people's stories so much, and the storytelling culture of my grandparents and their generation. I want to connect people, and I've found that I can try to do that and do succeed at times in poetry, and that it's very important to me. And I've always had this call to write, but poems are even more of an urgency, I would say, for me.
My very last question. What surprises you most about being a poet?
Really, just that it's so much fun. And that's both with the writing and the surprises that come in writing various pieces and the difference. I do write a lot of different styles and topics, and those differences are very surprising. And then also just the communal aspect of poetry, and especially since COVID, when the online open mics and poetry events came exploding out, and there's just so many, the surprise of and the wonder of getting to meet so many people and connect with them and hear their work and read my work, perform my work, that has been such a gift and a surprise, a huge surprise. A silver lining to the COVID pandemic. But yes, just the surprise of the fun of writing, the challenge and the brain and the emotions, balancing all that. Yes.
Laura, what can I say? Your work, well written, just great. And as a performance poet, flawless. I am so glad that I've had an opportunity to meet you and hear you for the very first time. Where do you go from here? What's your next project?
Well, that's a good dilemma. I have a collection that I've put together already during COVID time, and I hope to get back to that. And of course, I've written a lot since then, since 2020, 21, and I have been adding. And I hope to work on that some more. I hope to do some more cross-cultural, getting to the U.S., which sometimes is difficult for me with my time zone, but I'm not as much of a night owl as I used to be. But yes, I hope to do even more of that. And in the international circles, I really enjoy that. And I'm doing some live performing in Vienna. I sometimes go to the UK, and I have done live work this year there. And I hope to do more of that. I'm hoping to do with my pieces more collaboration with some musicians or visual artists. I found a group that does that. As I said, some of my pieces are sung in parts, and I think that's fascinating. And being the daughter of visual artists, I really appreciate that. And so yes, I've got sort of a cornucopia of ideas.
Right. And maybe one day we can collaborate.
Yes, that would be wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you.
I want to thank you for being my guest on this inaugural episode. Perfect program. Thank you so much.
Till next time, take care and let poetry ring somewhere throughout the land.